Luciel is a hardworking dummy who has his sorry life snatched away from him in an accident that causes him to be reincarnated as an SS rank healer. He is reborn with overpowered skills that attract sexy divas to be part of his harem. Before this happened, Luciel was excited at hitting his sales quota, which would make him get promoted for sure. Not until he was accidentally shot by an assassin who wanted to Isekai shop owner. Unfortunately, the shop owner had followed him with a blood-stained chest and suddenly pounced on him, causing the assassin to release a bullet mistakenly, which traveled straight down to Luciel's heart. Immediately after being shot, and in his own pool of blood, the only thing the foolish idiot could think about was how he must celebrate his new contract with his coworker. After a short while, he goes to meet his maker. However, something strange happens as he finds himself in a new world, a realm of magic and monsters. The dumbhead wakes up suddenly with his mouth open in a new world called Galdardia. He hears the word reincarnation in his head as he wonders what must have happened. Instead of trying to find out about more important things, the only thing he could think about was his suit and appearance in the former world. It appears that he is dressed like a cowboy instead of a business executive bidding for contracts. He hears a voice that tells him he will be given basic knowledge, after which he recites the phrase "status open to survive." This was done based on the instructions he was given. He uses the activation of status to perform a setup of personality and chooses the name Luciel for himself. He then decides to assess mastery, martial arts, and magic control as his skills, and as for his job, he chooses to be a healer and thinks about getting a job since he is reincarnated to be at a ridiculous age of 15. Then he sets out for the capital. On getting to the capital, he notices that people get in with a pass, and since he does not have one, he foolishly thinks of entering using a cunning way to get through the gates, since he has been given basic knowledge immediately after his reincarnation. There, he lies to the gullible gatekeeper that he has been cast away from his own village because of his healing powers, so he has decided to use it for other people who will appreciate it, who can ever be cast out of their own village for having healing powers. Fortunately for him, the gatekeeper is too stupid to be reasonable to realize he is lying. At that moment, they get interrupted by Lumina, a pretty girl who asks him if he is the healer they have been expecting. Seeing such a beautiful woman, Luciel is so shocked that he leaves his mouth wide agape until she volunteers to take him to the Healers Guild in the city. He does not follow her immediately because he is attacked by a set of unknown adventurers who eventually let him off on learning that he is a healer. It appears that healers are often treated better than any other people in the Republic of Street Chirul because of the services they render. However, he catches up with Lumina, who leads him to the guild. On getting to the guild, Luciel's brain seems to be on standby, not because he has reincarnated, but because he is just stupid. He is given a form to fill, and he goes ahead to ask Kururu, a lady who also works at the guild, if he could fill in village as the name of his hometown. Kururu cannot but wonder if he is too foolish to comprehend simple English. But then, despite her irritation, she helps to put him through on how to fill in the form, which he eventually fills. Luciel, who is not satisfied with showcasing how bad he is, walks up to Lumina to ask her if their town has another name aside from town. Lumina, sensing that he needs to be enlightened about many things, decides to take her time to explain to him. It appears that his useless basic knowledge is not being put to good use anyway. After a short while, Lumina bids him farewell, leaving him in the room she had booked for him. He stops her after thinking that he will not be able to survive if she does not take him along. She then explains that he can earn money through healing, and he can decide to either acquire skills by overworking himself and his magic, take a loan and enroll in an education sector, or become an apprentice for anyone in the city. He decides to settle for the first option. Later that night, he keeps trying to acquire skills for healing, as he foolishly exhausts his magic all through the night and then sleeps off. On the next day, a girl named Monica comes to serve him breakfast and tells him to work hard as Lumina booked him the room for 10 days. Then he settles down after she leaves and continues to work on his magic, this time improving a little bit. However, he thinks about what Lumina had told him the previous day and decides to step out for fresh air when he meets a disaster. Unfortunately, he falls into the hands of Bazin and his men, who had bullied him the previous day at the capital gate. They are almost resuming the torture when some of their men return injured from a fight. Bazin is furious at how bad the injury looks and how they cannot trust the capital health center. Luciel, who stood at a distance watching all that was happening, suddenly stepped forward to help after much thinking. He recalls telling Lumina that he would not become a dishonest healer like the others, so he had thought of stepping forward just to help. He tells them he can heal the injured soldiers, who look in his direction in the utmost disbelief. The adventurers are shocked to hear Luciel say that he can save their injured friends. However, when they give him an opportunity to help, he steps forward and tries to heal one of them, but he fails on the first attempt. The gaze Bazin gives him on failing makes him want to piss his pants. He begins to panic but summons the courage to try again, and on the second trial, he is able to heal one and many others until he slumps on the last attempt. This is because he had exhausted his magical chances. He feels rather sad about not being able to heal the last person, but remembers one last voice of the adventurer telling him that he had tried his best as he was seated on his bed that night. He decides to improve himself and makes up his mind to join the Adventurers Guild the next day. On the next day, he sets out to go to the guild and make inquiries. On getting there, he sees a beautiful receptionist called Nanella, causing him to fling his mouth wide open for flies to penetrate. He closes it to maintain his steeze as she approaches him. He tells her that he would like to enroll at the guild as a healer, and that he also plans to earn money through healing injured adventurers, and then sponsor the payment for his training with any revenue that is generated. She leads him to Broad, who is the chief instructor at the guild. He is shocked to see that he is much like the boss he had before his reincarnation. However, he summons up the courage to speak to him, telling him about his desire to enroll at the Adventurers Guild. Broad tells him to resume 6 days later as he returns home a happy man. He tells Monica that he already has an idea of where he will go after leaving the Healing Guild, but he must improve his skills at least a little more. She tells him to take her on a date if he is able to get to level 5 before he turns 20, as he opens his eyes wide at the thought of a date with a woman. Foolish Luciel is then encouraged to work hard. After a week, he was ready to enroll at the Adventurers Guild, so he bid Karuru farewell and left the motel. It is the beginning of a fresh start for him as he walks towards the Adventurers Guild. Everyone stares at him as he makes his way to the counter where he sees another lady other than Nanella, and remarks that all the women in that world are beautiful. She tells him to find his way underground from the building for his training, after which he goes underground, and cannot help but wonder why the training hall is so big, and on getting there, he bumps into Broad, who tells him he will be using the place for his training. After hearing that, he expresses gratitude for such a gesture, even if he carries a killer look. Broad is impressed that Luciel did not hesitate to show up at the guild again, despite his aggressive appearance. He puts him up to training immediately, and it appears that Luciel thought that he had met his death because of how Broad made him run around the big hall without stopping, as stopping would only mean death. On second thought, he seems to be happy that he is at least breathing until he passes out to Broad's surprise. One would have thought that Broad would stop at this, but it only got more intense as he sits hard on Luciel with his big fat backside. Luciel's crazy scream afterward wakes Nanella, who is fast asleep and keeps everyone in the Adventurers Building on alert. Broad ignores him and tells him to stretch to improve his range of motion and range of attack. He also tells him that he will have greater flexibility in dodging enemy attacks. Even with Luciel's intestine almost gushing out, Broad continues the training for his own good. The next thing up is to attack Broad, as his first attempt to kick Broad seemed like a baby trying to kick a giant.
Emotional, damn it!
Broad is quick to seize his legs and then instructs him to charge harder and faster. He fails, after which Broad slaps him hard as he falls to the ground, as it was enough to turn him deaf. He beckons him to get up again and try. He fails again and gets kicked, after which he rises immediately and attempts to hit Broad again. One would have thought that he would hit Broad with determination in his eyes, but he failed again. Broad advises him to keep trying and never try to use things he has just learned in a battle, as he must repeat every single thing until it becomes his second nature. Also, he tells Luciel to watch and learn, and then try it out on him. It seemed much more like his former world, where he would follow co-workers around just to learn by example. Broad cuts the conversation and tells him that it is time to move to the second round of the training. Luciel's eyes turned blue on hearing that there would be a second round. He was fatigued and was at least not expecting any further training for the day. It was like Broad had scheduled a death plan for him. However, he was ready to continue by healing himself of all the pain and slight injuries that he had sustained from the training, but Broad let him off on a second thought. He tells him to avoid magical healing and focus on natural healing, as it will help him develop the skill to increase his physical recovery, and also to never heal himself except if it is really severe. They deviate from the conversation as Lucial inquires as to why he is the only one using the underground training room, after which Broad explains that people have not enrolled in the past few days and the low-ranking adventurers do not have money to spare, so they focus more on real battle than training. He is moved to compassion by this, and he says he will save his powers only for the adventurers. However, this does not sit well with his master, who tells him to heal whoever needs it, regardless of their race. Just then, a girl comes in claiming to have been bitten by a forest wolf. She had been skeptical about coming even if she was told that he would do it for free, as the other healers had been too proud and demanding. Lucial rushes towards her to her surprise and heals her immediately. He did not only stop at that, he asks if anyone else is injured, after which they all begin to reveal their wounds for healing. Later that evening, Broad tells him that he is going to be very busy as a healer, but he is worried because he can only heal for a period of time until his magic runs out. Broad then advises him to use his powers until he is almost out of magic to build his strength like they had done earlier that day. Broad tells him to move to the guild, but he is very shocked at the gesture and quickly declines, saying he does not have enough money. However, he is told that he will be staying for free and will also be entitled to 3 square meals a day, as his survival rate needs to be increased for inexperienced adventurers because he is too skinny. Broad commends him that evening and says the world would be a better place if there were more healers like him. He switches again from an emotional moment to prohibiting him from leaving the guild during his training. The thought of being trapped at the guild until his training gets completed almost drives him mad. However, he had no other choice as there was nowhere else to go, but instead of devoting all his time to the guild, he asked if there could be a 1-month commitment, after which Broad agreed immediately. He is to work hard for a month until he is ready to train. On the next day, he goes to take a bath and foolishly turns a full bucket of water on his body, at once causing him to shake like a jellyfish in reaction to the cold, until Broad throws a packed cloth at his head and tells him to get dressed and report to the cafeteria immediately. He wonders where his old clothes were thrown as he checks out the gross clothes he was given by Broad. Nanella then approaches him, thanking him for taking care of the adventurers. Broad had sent her to wash his clothes, which made Lucial very happy. However, he changes his mind and says that he cannot let someone as pretty as Ella do his laundry. She ignores him and insists on doing his laundry as he expresses his gratitude and promises to help her if she ever needs anything. On getting to the cafeteria, he is reminded of the office get-together as Broad calls his attention to a separate table. Lucial is shocked to see so many delicacies on the table and wonders if they were throwing a party. He is even more shocked to his bones when Broad tells him that he will be finishing all the food and then will be returning to the basement after. It seemed like Lucial would die the next day because of how gigantic the meat that was served appeared. However, this also happens to be a part of his training. On getting back to the basement, Broad shows him to his room and tells him to get plenty of sleep as he will be busy from the next day. However, after Broad leaves, he tries to get some sleep but soon jumps out of bed because he is unable to sleep. He checked the time and was almost raving mad at the thought of going to bed at just 7 p.m. in the evening. He then decides to master his skills to boost his levels, since it is so hard for him to fall asleep. Foolish Lucial eventually falls asleep when it is morning, and as a result of this, gets woken immediately a few minutes after he had just fallen asleep. He was led to the cafeteria, where he would take his meals during his training. It is at this cafeteria that he is introduced to Gulgar, a fat chef who works at the place. Lucial immediately pictures him to be a fat bear and unconsciously calls him Bear, asking to know his race, but much to Lucial's surprise, he tells him that he is a proud wolf folk. Just after the introduction, he serves Lucial a disgusting drink, which is to improve his power. He is almost losing his mind but still gulps down the drink with perseverance. Broad is impressed as well as Gulgar, since no one ever tries to gulp down the substance in history. Foolish Lucial, who should have focused more on the training, boasts that he would hit Broad on the second attempt. This in turn makes Broad very happy and then tells him to bring it on. Lucial immediately feels like he has just opened the gates of hell by boosting Broad's morale. However, just as they were about to get into something, a girl and her guild member interrupt the session as she reports of getting bitten by a were-rat, and would be delighted if she got healed. Lucial heals her without delay. It is at this moment that he sees something watery drop, and then looks up to see that she has just moved to tears, having been healed. They are delighted that Lucial did not draw a line between human and beast, so the girl flings herself at Lucial, who stares at the others in bewilderment. They ask if they could come if they get injured again, and Luciel says they can come. However, just before turning to go, a guide who had accompanied the injured girl walked towards Luciel to commend him for being able to persevere in training with the mad Broad, who changes at intervals. Other adventurers usually avoid training with Broad because of how hard his sessions seem to be. Later that day, Luciel was served another full cup of the disgusting substance X after his normal meal, since he wanted to grow stronger as fast as possible. On leaving the cafeteria for his room, he observed that everyone who had locked eyes with him kept running into hiding. This is strange to him as he thinks that he is being watched, since he trains from 7 a.m. in the morning to 7 p.m. at night, eats 3 square meals daily, and also practices his magic control and handling later at night. All of these make him feel a sense of improvement as he slowly closes his eyes to sleep. Meanwhile, on the next morning, he tells Broad and Gulgar that it feels like a bunch of people have been watching him recently. However, as they turned away like sinners on hearing this, it appeared that they were behind the trail. Luciel demands to know why they have asked the whole building to keep an eye on him, and Broad says that they are afraid that he might run away, and if that happens, it means that people who are trying to become adventurers who weren't born into wealth, and then take up dangerous missions to sustain severe injuries just to pay the guild will die from serious pain. They cannot afford to lose the one and only honest healer they had found. Luciel then figures that they will never be able to get their injuries treated if he ever leaves, and their fate is right in his hands. However, he reminds Broad, who frowns, that he had only agreed to stay for a month, and then leaves after promising to drag the other adventurers to the cafeteria to drink the disgusting substance X, alongside Broad, who grins with his ugly teeth open on hearing that he will also be forced to take it, since he is the instructor. Everything keeps going rather smoothly, and so the months start flying by as Luciel begins to make more friends from healing. He can only hope that this gets him accustomed to adventures. Also, he starts doing more target practice with Broad's help. He still appears to be lagging behind even if he is getting stronger. However, he keeps trying hard as the cup of his substance X keeps getting bigger and more bitter. He soon completes his training for a month and wishes to continue, but he must return to the healer's guide to pay his offer. On hearing that he would stay to train if he had enough money to pay for his offer, and to also sponsor his training, Broad rewarded him with the exact amount of coins to cover his offer for a year and to sponsor his training further. Everyone bids him farewell and tells him to return in earnest. On getting back to the Healers Guild, he tenders his offering as he is told that he will be assessed an additional offering if he gets promoted within the year. He says that he must direct his attention to becoming strong enough for independence, other than sorting out any ranking. However, he promises to return for his promotion when he has earned enough. Monica is very delighted as he bids her farewell and then returns to the Adventurers Guild. On getting back to the guild, he sees Broad, who appears to be waiting for him, but lies that he was only passing by the reception. Broad then instructs Nandela, who is happy to see Luciel, to renew his adventurer's card. This causes the hair on Luciel's small head to rise furiously as he is shocked that none of them sought his permission before renewing his card. Broad drags him helplessly to the training room and tells him not to worry about the contract. After the training, he is fed as though he will die tomorrow as usual, and then Broad hands him a book called Encyclopedia of Low-Level Holy Magic as a treat for coming home on time. The purpose of the book is for him to learn about the recovery process and the detoxification spell cure. Broad then sips a glass of juice instead of substance X as he turns to see Gulgar laughing. He scolds him immediately for the sadist that he is and to also dissuade Luciel from thinking he is nice. Broad exits the cafeteria after instructing Luciel to join him for the evening training. He is forced again to drink Substance X, which almost ruined his sanity, and with this, he appears over-energetic and ready to challenge Broad, but with the intention of knocking him out, not that evening, but next year. After working hard for months, he is given a free day off work for a day, but Luciel does not really know what to do with this free day, as Broad tells him to visit the butchery as it will keep him from being bored. On getting to the butchery, he meets with a butcher who introduces himself as Galba, and also a brother to Gulgar. It is at this time that Luciel notices the resemblance. Galba brings out a very big bear from a small bag, much to Luciel's surprise. He explains that the bag is a magic bag that can size numerous monsters. After that, he took out his knife to begin the butchery. Luciel watches him as he effortlessly cuts through the big animal. In a minute, he had already divided the parts to be sold to other guilds in the city and for personal consumption. Meanwhile, he brings out a rabbit and tells Luciel to try butchering it. Broad had sent him to a butchery for personal development and to study the weak areas of monsters. Lucio's butchery session ends in disaster as he is covered in blood, nauseated, and enveloped in guilt. He goes to wash his hands in the yard, where Nanella comes to see him. She comforts him and tells him how hard it is for other adventurers whenever they isekai monsters. He is relieved when she holds his hands and asks her to stay a bit longer after making her intentions of showing gratitude for all he had done for them known. Later that night, he eats the rabbit he had butchered and finds out that it is very delicious, only for the moment to be ruined by Substance X. On the next day, he is given another day off as he begins to improve himself and also works really hard. On a fateful afternoon, he bumps into Melina, Murnell, and Nanella, who claim that Broad had sent them to enlighten him. Lucio thanks them for the kind gesture but also reminds them that the other adventurers could isekai him if they do not stop holding him in delicate places. However, they just ignored this and dragged him off to the library. On getting to the library, each of them shows him the book they have gotten to help him improve. However, he only chooses Nanella's books, causing the rest of the girls to excuse them. Nanella teaches him a few things about the town. Months passed as he kept training, treating wounds, having study sessions, and running random errands. Half a year has passed, and he has improved to a certain level. On a fateful day, Murnell and Melina, who never stopped being extra around him, after which they notice that his clothes do not fit him perfectly. His shirt appeared too tight, making him look like a princess. Nanella comes to save him from the two girls, claiming that she had been assigned to take him outside the guild to get new clothes. He is able to get new fitted clothes as Nanella tells him that Broad had paid for them all. On returning to the guild, he hears the terrific noise of a voice that sounds familiar and rushes to the place immediately, only to find Monica lying in a pool of blood. He quickly gets her to the guild alongside Nanella and takes her test after successfully healing her. The moment Monica opens her eyes, he explains everything that has happened to her, and then she confirms that a healer is after her life for objecting to selling people who have been healed to slavery in other countries because of their failure to pay for treatment. Lucio advises that she stays in the Adventurers Guild for the time being to avoid getting into danger again. She decides to stay at the guild and keep working as a receptionist, while the assassin is later apprehended, however, not revealing the healer that had sent him. Meanwhile, as it became a full year, Lucio decides to leave the guild for a while as he will return to training harder. He returns to the Healers Guild on the next day to stay there for a while, but meets a rather annoyed receptionist in the person of Kururu, who would prefer that he had not returned. Lucio is quick to understand that she had been left alone ever since Monica's departure, and she confirms it by saying that she had not been able to hire anyone else, which had made work tiring and very complicated for her. Despite being sorry about this, he enjoins her to be happy that Monica is at least safe. She then loosens up and attends to him, asking for his card. She screams in shock on finding out that he had been engaging himself in strenuous training as a healer. Lucio tries to assure her that he has control over what he is doing, and it is not enough to take his life, and besides, all the effort is for him to improve. They are interrupted by the unannounced visit of Broad. He comes forward and drops a huge bag of coins for Kururu, claiming that it's the pay for Lucio's work for a year. He says he will pay another year's fee just to have Lucio. Kururu releases Lucio to Broad immediately, who in turn takes him to the Adventurers Guild. On getting to his room at the Adventurers Guild, he checks out some books he had gotten to study, which are to help him to improve his healing spell. Broad comes into his room and summons him to the cafeteria. Meanwhile, on getting to the cafeteria, he has prepared everyone to welcome Lucio with a toast of juice, except that Lucio has to make his own toast with Substance X. He ends up cursing everyone in his heart and wishes that they had made their toast with the same substance. After drinking the substance, people began to avoid him as he reeked of a bad smell. However, Bazin and his friends approach him to tease him as they ask if he is attracted to boys instead of girls, since he had not been caught making advances towards anyone except for being engrossed with training. Lucio defends this by explaining that Broad is bound to slit his tiny throat if he is caught flirting with any girl that works at the guild. Monica asks him to tell her about the situation at the Healing Guild that she had left, as he states that Kururu is finding it hard to adjust to her absence. However, she is quick to cheer up as she has stayed safe at the Adventurers Guild and is also able to make new friends. She thanks Lucio for saving her life as he tries to touch her left cheek, but retrieves immediately and composes himself, drawing the attention of Bazin and his friends, Meanwhile, while a fun moment was going on at the Adventurers Guild, Botticelli, the head healer, and the one who owns the largest clinic in the city through illegal wealth, holds a meeting with his workers who report the new development that is being made by Lucio. This makes him very angry as he sets out to visit Lucio in person. After a while, he storms into the Adventurers Guild, scaring everyone there and heading straight towards Lucio, whom one of his workers had pointed out to be the new healer. Botticelli introduces himself, and it is at that moment Lucio found him out to be the healer who had tried to harvest Monica's life. This annoys him, but he tries very hard to hide his irritation. Botticelli cajoles him to stop helping people for free and come to work under him instead. This sounds ridiculous, as Lucio declines almost immediately without much thought. This hurts Botticelli, who screams and rants on and on like a madman. His ranting gets worse when Lucio points out his wrongs. He quickly instructs one of his men to send Lucio to the depth of Hades right there and then. However, Brod stops them before they can make any silly move, and he causes them to run off like toddlers, including the almighty Botticelli, after scaring him to death just by appearance. Lucio thanked Brod for saving his life, but little did he know that, aside from Botticelli, some troublemakers had been after his life, but he was not bothered because he had not done anything wrong in the past few days. However, Brod sees the need to train him harder so that he can defend himself if trouble arises, also because of the fear of the fact that dangerous people could come to him just to gain favor with Botticelli. He gets him into severe training and advises him never to check his performance level until he is asked to do so. This is to keep him focused as it will get harder. Lucio is required to take larger doses of Substance X and to also train twice as hard as he had been training, and that is how he spends 6 days a week in his new world. He spends the day of wind and sun on martial arts and fighting, the day of water on spearmanship, and many more on different training activities. Meanwhile, at his clinic, Botticelli is very angry to find out that Lucio charges 1 silver coin for 1 hour of treatment, which presents Botticelli as a greedy healer because of his exorbitant price. He tears the news report immediately and soaks his writing material into an ink of wickedness, hence writing a letter to the administrative head of healers. In the letter, he cunningly requests that Lucio be transferred to a town where healers are needed, since he is very talented because he is charging a very ridiculous rate in their town and also affecting his own business, after which he laughs very hard, giving him a madman's vibe. It had been 6 months since Botticelli's confrontation with Lucio. Meanwhile, the letter is still being processed. Lucio, on the other hand, is experiencing maximum growth and also eating a healthy diet. Golgar says that it would be hard to recognize him as a healer as he is getting to look more like an adventurer in shape as Lucio and Brod speak about how intense their sword training has been in the past few months. This has left Golgar's mouth wide agape as he cannot expect less from a demon instructor and his meso-zombie pupil. Lucio protests being called a meso-zombie, while Brod claims to be a very gentle teacher. Nandela interrupts their chit-chat by bringing a letter to Lucio. It appears that the Holy Church of Shirul, which serves as the guild headquarters, had sent the letter. He reads out the contents of the letter, which has it that he has been summoned to work at the Holy Shirul Church headquarters. They request that he transfer in the 6th month of the year. Brod immediately figures that it is Botticelli's doing. He is trying to block all healing at the guild, and this is why he is sending Lucio to the headquarters. Brod cheers him up as they still have half of the year until his departure. He is to heal anyone that needs help alongside his Spartan training. However, his magic is not holding up as Golgar shows up with Substance X. To show how bad this disgusting substance appears, it is weirdly blue and brings out an orange steam, followed by a powerful stench and hot sensation that affects any individual around whosoever is consuming it. You do not want to imagine what Lucio, the constant consumer, is facing. Brod Martial Arts, on the other hand, has reached level 7 in the process of teaching Lucio, causing him to look bright and young. The ridiculous thing is that both Golgar and Brod are not even sure of what Substance X does, and now it is too late to tell Lucio to stop drinking it. Galbar brings back a message about what Brod had asked him to do. He had told him to find out if it was really Botticelli who had worked out Lucio's unexpected transfer, and if he was going to be safe at his new workplace. Galbar confirms that it is Botticelli and that Lucio would be safe at the church. Galbar suggests that they put the head of the Healers Guild out of business. Galbar is a former assassin who had retired to be a butcher at the Adventurers Guild. He is now back on track on Brod's instructions to help Lucio. He is also very interested in Luciel, who seems like a totally different boss who is only interested in survival, and that is what had led him to their guild. Half a year passed in a flash after he got a letter about transferring to the Holy Shrine Church headquarters. He has finally become an A-rank healer, and is headed to the Holy City because declining an order from the Pope can also mean that he might face some kind of inquisition and weird accusations. He tells Luciel to find his way back to the Adventurers Guild if church headquarters have corrupt people, which he agrees to do. However, before finally exiting the building, he takes Broad to where some of the adventurers who he was unable to save on entering the city are buried, after which he expresses his regrets and pays respect to them again. He then asks Broad to work on Botticulli and his useless clinic, as it will put more lives in danger. Also, he cajoles him to start training rookies so that there will be fewer injuries. Broad asks for his reason for such a request, as adventurers are responsible for themselves. Luciel admits that having an instructor like him is what has made him better, and also, if adventurers get stronger and increase in their basic knowledge, they will be safe from sustaining too many unnecessary injuries. Broad agrees to grant his request as he inquires to know what he should do with Monica, and if it sits right with him for her to remain in their guild. He is not aware that both Nanella and Monica were around them, but in hiding. However, he affirms that she stays, but the decision to either stay or leave still lies in her hands. He calls them out at this point, to their surprise, because they had secretly followed them while Broad had caught them a while ago. Luciel is shocked to see them as Broad leaves them with him. He takes the opportunity to express his gratitude to Nanella and Monica, one after the other, moving her to uncontrollable tears. On returning to the building, he bids everyone farewell and leaves after receiving a token and a magic bag from Broad. On getting towards the city gate, he is told that some accomplices are waiting patiently in his carriage. Luciel is curious to know who had volunteered to escort him to the church until he finds out that it is Bazin and his friends. This causes him to shed tears that are enough to form his own river. They beckon him to stop crying as he looks back at the Adventurers Guild one last time. On arriving in the city of Shirul, he is reluctant to get off the carriage without Bazin or any of his men, so that his tiny ass will not get bullied. They make a joke about this, but still follow him to the Adventurers Guild of the city. He sees that it is built the same way the other one was built, as he is ushered to a separate room by a girl whose name is Milty and is not too attractive,
emotional damage,
unlike Monica and Nanella. Bazin steps forwards and introduces himself, stating that he had come to introduce Luciel to their master. Bazin, noticing how Luciel is unimpressed by the sight of things, tells him to never judge a book by its cover. As a waitress, although she may seem ugly, she is as powerful as he is. The voice of the master, who sounds more like a beast than a human, jolts them from their conversation. He recognizes Bazin as they exchange pleasantries. He is a lot different from Broad, as he has a beard and a non-intimidating appearance as he is very close to the ground. Luciel then steps forward to introduce himself as a healer, which sets everyone on alert immediately, as he can feel the animosity in their reaction. The master recognizes him as Broad's apprentice immediately, and although his mission in the city is not yet revealed, he is aware that Luciel had not just come to say hi. Bazin leaves them both to attend to other things, while Luciel places an order for Substance X in the barrel. Everyone expresses shock at his demand for such a disgusting drink, as Milty asks him to repeat himself for clearance. He repeats the same sentence, this time ordering 3 barrels. Everyone makes comments about him, but he ignores them and faces his plight. And it is a plight because Substance X isn't soothing to the stupid Luciel either. However, he is served just a full cup of the substance because the master is skeptical of him being able to handle it. He, including everyone, was bewildered as he gulped down the substance without stopping halfway or throwing up. This convinces the master, who prepares 3 barrels of the substance for him at once. However, before leaving the guild, the master asks him if it is true that he heals people for just a silver coin. He then explains that the people in Meritoni were good to him, and he would only consider this if the case was the same in Shirul. They head towards the church headquarters immediately. On getting to the gate of the church, Luciel expresses gratitude to Bazin and his friends as they bid him farewell and ask that he remains a good person that he had always been. He walks into the headquarters alone, swallowing hard as it is very big, and he can liken it to resuming at a new workplace in his previous life. He is welcomed by 2 receptionists who lead him to the supervisor, whose name is Granhard, and is also the priest of the church who had summoned him to the headquarters. The priest leads him to another chamber of the building using a magical elevator. He explains that the elevator is used to keep unknown people from entering the church, but Luciel thinks it is otherwise. Meanwhile, on getting into another room, he bumps into Lumina, who seems pleasant to see him. She tells him to visit her later that day, and then excuses him as he follows behind the priest. They soon arrive at a room that is endorsed with torture materials. This causes Luciel's sweat pores to resume work, but he is relieved as soon as Granhard tells him that it's just a store for keeping things. They soon get into another room right beside the store, which seems like an interrogation space. Granhard signals for him to sit, and then questions him about the letter he had received that says that he had caused some other healers to run out of business in Narratoni. Luciel affirms this immediately but gives his valid reasons for doing such. The priest then promises to do something about what he has just heard. However, he will resume work in earnest. Granhard describes his work as one that involves going to the labyrinth to exorcise the undead, which comes with a lot of money. Later that day, he is led to Lumina's room by one of the young priests. He explains everything that had happened to Luminal and how he got to the headquarters, as she is not so comfortable with the difficult responsibility he is saddled with, so she advises him to be careful. On the next day, Luciel had already made up his mind to give all it takes for his survival, and so he is led to Jord, a young man who is a little older than him. Granhard is also present at the meeting as Jord introduces himself as Luciel's predecessor. Luciel is given a protection robe in no time and also a pass to use the elevator after swearing to never bring in pets or invalids or even normal people. He resumes his work for the day. On getting to the labyrinth, Luciel is able to put up with the stench as he had experienced worse with Substance X. His master's training seems to pay off. Meanwhile, Jord uses the purification method to exorcise a few undead bodies and then leaves the rest to Luciel, running from a stench. It is not long after Jord leaves that many undead approach Luciel. He is very shocked to his bones and recites the purification spell like a typewriter, and on the mention of purification, after stammering at first, they become exorcised. He settles from exorcising to eating lunch after concluding the first level, and then moves to the second level where he exorcises as many as possible. Jord performs the purification spell on seeing him, because he had met with too many undead spirits for half a day. However, Luciel seemed to have found out that the labyrinth is only an illusion and a training ground. Jord tells him that he can exchange the magic stones he picks up from the labyrinth for points at the shop. At the shop, he is able to exchange the gemstones he had gathered for over 4,000 points. However, it is unable to purchase a spellbook which costs about 1 million. On getting back to the church, he bumps into the priest who had come to check up on him. He is also told to use the weapons in the storage room if the need for them arises. He is given a clerical robe and told to eat at least 3 square meals per day. The priest rants on until Luciel gets tired of listening to his croaked voice. He is happy when the priest eventually leaves. On the next day, he reports back to the labyrinth, and that being his second day at work, he is determined to take down as many undead bodies as possible. He comes across zombie knights and archers and slashes through them in no time. Luciel keeps exploring bit by bit as his points begin to attain new heights. On the 10th day, he had already attained another point by cleaning up over 20 zombies. He tries to find the staircase leading to the next level, but he is transfixed when he sees a strange door that looks like the boss room. But he does not explore any further as he returns for the day. The boss room is later explained to him by Jord as an abode for a large group of zombies and their king, and even Jord has stopped at the front door of the room before passing the assignment down to Luciel. On the next day, he foolishly goes to the labyrinth to ambush them without doing his research and almost gets killed in the process. However, he manages to take down every single one of them, including their boss, who is called a White, even without his magic. He packs all the gems he can get to Catalia for exchange. The weight had turned into the biggest gem that was retrieved, hence earning Luciel a lot of points. Catalia, who is shocked that he is able to retrieve the White's clothes and powerful weapon, takes him to their female pope, who blesses him with a sack to accommodate anything he decides to carry in the world in return for the clothes and weapons that were retrieved. Luciel tries to list his mistakes from the boss battle, but it is hard for him to fit them all into one page. He laments because Broad would have scolded him for such mediocrity, while Gulgar would have made him drink a full barrel of Substance X all at once. He thinks of asking if they will let him join in on Paladin or Palpar training. In the middle of his worries, his stomach begins to grumble as he figures it is already time for breakfast. On his way to the table, he bumps into Luminal and 2 members of her regiment in the persons of Queen and Lucy. Lumina remarks that she had heard about how he had improved in just 10 days, and she would love to hear more about it at the breakfast table. Luciel is very delighted to hear this. However, after telling them about his escapades at the labyrinth, he is scolded and seriously reprimanded, with each word hitting him like an arrow. Queen asks him if he has a death wish. Lucy affirms that whatever he did was foolish and he just got lucky. One would have thought Luminal would remain quiet, but she shoots her own arrow to finish it up, saying that she had thought that he had outgrown ignorance, but it appears that he has started taking blind risks. Luciel was already in tears before she said that she could no longer trust people who decide to risk their own lives. While Luciel tenders his apology for risking his own life, it appears that Lumina was just very worried about him, and in a bid to protect him, she tells him to resume training with her regiment. Later that day, being a goat that hardly listens, he revisits the labyrinth, but luckily, there were no major surprises on the 11th level as he explored down to the 12th and stopped. He goes to exchange his gems for coins, and he is handed the bag that the Pope had given him. He finds out that the Pope had informed Catalia to throw in all the spell tomes they had, so that he then learns from them. On the next day, he safely explores all the way to the 15th level, and after then, he resumes his training with Lumina's Valkyrie Paladin Regiment, where Lumina calls him stupid on the first day for saying he could not contend with a woman. They kick-started the training with jogging, as Luciel appeared to be 10 times as slow even if he thought he was running as fast as he could, and by the time the lap was completed within 30 minutes, lazy Luciel was 8 laps behind. After that, they break into a group and begin combat training, where Luminal trains with him, but ends up beating him blue and black to the point where Queen and Lucy had to tend to have his injuries, and still, they say it is a sign of respect for Luciel.
Stop the cap!
As she had never fought them to that point since the beginning of their years as regiments. Lumina Selma calls him an oddball, and in his protest, she points out everything about his personal life that he had done with Prod a few years ago, including pointing out odd names like the Meso-zombie healer that he was called. Luciel couldn't have been more humiliated as he broke down in tears like a baby. On the next day, he was unhappy that his skills had not increased, despite his training the previous day. However, he moves forward, creating the excuse that it might be normal for things to be the way they are. Meanwhile, instead of just moving to the next level, Luciel, who is a stubborn goat and did not learn from his first mistake, decides to try out stepping on a trap purposely to see what happens, since his aura coat and area barrier are unbeatable. He is lucky enough to be able to control the attack that the trap unleashed. He continues exploring day by day until he is at the 20th level. However, he does not explore it just yet, as it looks like another room of a group of zombies with a single weight. 2 days later, he keeps battling the undead using Broad's fighting style, and then, on a fateful morning, Elizabeth, a member of Lumina's regiment, knocks on his door and claims to have come to get him. She tells him that they will be thoroughly schooling him in dual-wielding technique for the day, and, after a few days, he is back at the 20th level again in the labyrinth. Under Lumina's guidance, he steadily absorbs his training lessons with the Paladin Regiment, causing him to clear out the zombies on the 20th floor without any serious complications. He gives the items he has retrieved back to the Pope and explains how powerful the labyrinth had always been. It is a warning for Luciel to stop seeing it as child's play or an illusion. She explains a short history of how monsters came to dwell in the labyrinth and how they now use healers as exorcists, just because they do not have the workforce to conquer the labyrinth. The Pope then saddles him with the responsibility of continually exploring the labyrinth. She promises him a promotion when he reaches the healer rank of 7. Luciel heads to the Adventurers Guild to order 10 more barrels of substance, but he is intimidated about the remarks people made on seeing that he is a healer. They can easily tell because of the robe he is wearing. However, before delivering his order, the master requests that he resumes work at the guild like he did in Neratoni. But he explains that this is quite hard because he had already been promoted to the headquarters. However, to fulfill his promise to Broad and his friends at Meritoni, he heals people at the rate of just 1 silver coin as they stare at him in surprise. The master takes him to the inner chamber where all the injured people are laid, only for them to call them names and ask that he leave the vicinity. This is because of how healers in Shirul have hurt them in the past. The master of the Adventurers Guild beckons them to be a bit calmer, as he is the urban legend from Meritoni whose news has traveled far and wide. On hearing this, they decide to give him a chance, and after that, he gives them 3 conditions before healing, which they agree to adhere to, except the nickname part. After the healing, they could not contain their joy for a while, and then they got distracted having a meeting just to deliberate on a nickname for him. And so they resolved on calling him a name that is worse than the masochist healer, but sounds pleasant to their mediocre minds. In all the names in the world, they choose to call him a saint and a weirdo, street weirdo for short. Lucial was almost losing his mind, but he had no choice anyway. On getting back to the headquarters, he goes back to see Catalia, who says that he is unusually late. Then he explains how he had to mobilize the crowd who he had healed for Lumina and her regiment, since they had been good to him. The next thing he says throws Catalia off balance as he asserts that he would be staying at the labyrinth and would only return once in a while. Catalia objects to this vehemently at first but later succumbs, reluctantly giving him the condition of returning at least once a week and being safe from death. However, he returns about 3 days later to pick up the paladin armor that the Pope had prepared to keep him safe. He is also given an angle pillow to help him sleep soundly so that he is fully refreshed the next day. He then heads to get some food and returns to the labyrinth. Meanwhile, just before he returns to the labyrinth, he goes to check on the Adventurers Guild, and it appears that the number of deaths and failed missions at Shirul's Adventurers Guild have dropped drastically with Lucial's help. He also heals a few people at the guild who give him little information about Meritoni and Lumina's regiment. One tells him that the regiments are safe, while another tells him that he heard that a whirlwind broad is out of control as he kidnaps the adventurers and drags them to his training hall. Another speaks about how Gulgur forces people to drink substances. Lucial, on the other hand, has been calm until he is told that 1 or 2 receptions in Meritoni's Adventurers Guild are getting married. Lucial is almost losing his mind at the thought of Manella and Monica getting married. He should return to Meritoni before he goes crazy. Days passed, and it happened to be half a year since he attained level 20. He had gone all the way up to vanquishing the boss on the 30th level. He returns to see Catalia, who could not hide her happiness on seeing that he is alive. He had earned 426,549 points in the past few days. He uses the points to purchase a new robe and to also store up magic portions. He mistakenly speaks about how he can use the area's high healing spell due to magic. However, this gives him away, as it is very weird for a healer as young as he is to possibly possess such abilities, and so Catalia drags him like cattle for slaughter to the Pope's presence. It is at that time that he learns about Substance X after claiming that it is the only substance that seems to give him energy. The Pope explains that it was originally created to awaken people's latent talent, and it is made from medicinal herbs, a dragon's heart and spirit water, and then crafted into a pill. A sage claimed to have developed a magical device to replicate the recipe at the time, but what came out instead was a liquid, causing him to give it another name called God's Lament. It happens that it was only referred to as Substance X in the form of a pill. The Pope commends his ability to take such a dreadful substance for 2.5 years, and then proceeds to ask him to tell her about the monsters he had encountered recently. Lucial lists them to be 3 whites and 5 ghost knights. He evades them, eventually defeating them with the area's high healing. He delivers the items that were explored for the week to the Pope, who promises to send him a reward through Catalia. However, he has to keep exploring the labyrinth. The next day, he goes to get his reward from Catalia, who gives him a letter that includes the effects of the Substance X. He takes it and promises to read it later in the labyrinth, and on getting to the labyrinth that day, he finds out from the letter that the effect of Substance X is to amplify 3 primary urges, including sleep, food, and sex. Aside from this, it also has some unexpected side effects, while it equally protects the body from various maladies while sleeping. However, a tragedy occurred, following a wave of criticism due to its unbearable bad smell. It was deemed unfit for the church and slated for disposal. He finds out that his consumption of substances has led to his desire for food and sleep, and his reduced desire for sex, as it increases one of the 3 primal urges and transforms energy to enhance one's overall physical ability. He then resolves to fall in love once he makes it through the labyrinth. Foolish, Lucial begins to run deep into the labyrinth, screaming at the monsters to come out to their deaths, all because of the desire to have a woman whom he regards as a future. It was exactly a month since Lucial learned the truth about Substance X. In that time, he had explored all the way from the 31st floor to the 40th floor. He started encountering monsters he had never seen before and eventually made it to the 40th floor. However, something about it keeps giving him a bad feeling as he roams the streets of Shirul and wonders if he can gather more information about the undead at the Adventurers Guild. However, just before he opens the door to the guild, a young girl stops him by sticking her hands to his robe and looking at him helplessly. He bends over to talk to her, and then decides to lead her inside to avoid being tagged with weird nicknames if people spot them together. However, he is shocked to see Monica and Nanella at Shirul's Adventurers Guild when he closes the door behind them. But before they can even speak to him, the rough people of Shirul seize him, announcing his presence and asking that people be brought in. He has to avoid every form of trouble. He cleanses them rather quickly and gulps down a glass of magic renewal substance at intervals. He then pauses suddenly and points to the little beastfolk girl, who had come to him for help but could not express herself. He asked that she be given a chance to state her grievances, and as he carried on with healing people, he could not help but wonder what Monica and Nanella had visited Shirul to do, and for a second, he asked them there to pause the process, just to think that they might be there to tell him about their wedding. He is near tears but decides not to cry. Rather, he focuses on concluding the healing process, which he had once successfully completed. After the healing, they had already figured out what the little girl had come to say, as Lucial is beckoned to follow her to the slum immediately, and since it appeared to be urgent, Nanella and Monica volunteer to go with him, as well as the master of the guild, since it is a dangerous place and no one from Meritoni really knows much about the place. Lucial is relieved at the level of support and sacrifice he had gotten, and on getting to the slum, everywhere stinks uncontrollably, coupled with the stain of blood and the unusual smell of death. As they move closer, they see so many people who are severely injured, as the master who had accompanied them explains that they had heard that they are representatives from the independent city-state of Dennis, and on getting close to the border, they were attacked by a large group of thieves. Lucial wants to help all of them at once, but unfortunately, since there are so many of them, they cannot be transported to the clinic at once. However, as he steps forward to help use an area healing spell, he is strangely attacked by one of the unconscious bodies, who stands straight without uttering a word and pierces him on the side of the belly. Lucial falls to the ground, reminiscing on how he had died in his previous life, and so he pulls out the sharp object from the injured area and refuses to die. Instead, he heals everyone immediately, including himself, and then becomes very weak after the healing process. Lucial figures that he was only instinctively trying to protect other beastfolks as he purifies everyone and casts a recovery spell around the area, and then drinks up his magical substance to cover the healing process. He had also healed the guy who stabbed him and found out later that he is the little girl's father. However, just as they prepare to leave, someone who resides in the area pleads loudly with Lucial to help those who are residents of the area. He ends up treating every single person, and even purifies the area of the plague that had endangered the people, and after then, he lectures them on hygiene and regular cleaning, which is to prevent people from getting sick or unnecessarily injured. Later that night, at the city center, and in the holy capital of Shirul, he meets with Monica and Nanella, whom he had kept waiting for since the beginning of the day. He inquires about what had brought them to the city, after which they tell him that they had included in their letters that Melina and Renelle are getting married. He is shocked at two things. First, that they had written him a letter, and he had gotten none of it from them, and secondly, that they were not the ones getting married as he had thought. However, the second shock brings a little bit of relief to his spirit, but he goes to confront the master of the Adventurers Guild in Shirul for not delivering all his letters to Broad and the girls. Claims to have forgotten about having too much to drink all night. In the middle of the confrontation, Alitz, one of Shirul's adventurers, seeks to know who Lucial's girlfriend is between Nanella and Monica. However, he takes his time to explain that they are just two important girls in his life who had helped him during his training process with the Whirlwind. He then turns to them and asks them how many nights they will be staying, after which they tell him that they will be around for 3 nights. This makes him delighted as he remarks that he would like to spend as much time as possible with them both. They engage him immediately, grabbing him by the 2 arms after claiming to hear the receptionist in the guild saying that there are some injured folks in the training hall. Lucial is almost losing his mind because after all they have gone through in the slum, he should be resting, or maybe he shouldn't have told them he wanted to spend time with them after all. They kept him busy from that day as one thing led to the next, and they eventually did not do anything special during their visit. They just happened to treat the adventurers and to tender an apology for not delivering the letters. The master held a huge party for everyone, and then, before they could say jack, it was already time for Monica and Nanella to exit the capital. Luciel is driven to tears as he bids them farewell. It appears that their visit had given him energy to keep fighting through the labyrinth, as the energy to do his best feels renewed, and on returning to the Shirul Guild, some of the beast folks he had healed a few days ago came to pay obedience to him. He encourages them to never throw their lives away, as they have been saved for good. They had come all the way because they wanted to found a healers' guild in Yenis, as they had already met with the Pope, who Yenis granted their request. The little girl who had come to report the incident the other day and whose name happened to be Sheila also clung to his dress as a sign of gratitude. It is at that time that her father explains that her reason for being silent is the damage that was done to her vocal cords in an accident a few years ago. Luciel then leans over her and commended her for being a hero who has saved all her people. He beckons her to never be held back by fate, but keeps doing her best instead. He had blessed her secretly using the spell of extra healing, but he is unable to dwell on it as he is not so sure if it is already effective, so he bids them farewell, hoping that Sheila regains a little of her voice. Later that day, while he had already made it to the main chamber of the 40th floor, Luminal commended him for his hard work, but they must prepare him for the tough enemy waiting to consume him on the floor. Lumina challenges him to a duel just to find out how much he has grown stronger in the past few months, and finds out that he has improved. However, he still had a long way to go. Meanwhile, on the next day, with Lumina leading them, the regiment set out for the border. 6 months later, Luciel prepares to attack the 40th floor. He had spent enough time training, and now his mind is finally made up. He reports to Cavlia, who gives him a letter from Lumina and wishes him luck. In the text, she states that on getting to the level 40 main chamber, he will most likely find a man who used his exceptional spearmanship to climb the ranks and become head Templar, alongside a knight who used his powerful recovery magic and long sword technique to fight his way to become captain of the paladins. It appears that both powerful foes merged into one undead monster. Luciel successfully defeated the monsters, all merged in one body, by chopping off his skeleton skull, and with the help of Lumina's enlightenment, and after beating the floor 40 bosses, since he could not return to the surface, he had no choice but to advance to the 50th level. He walks straight ahead, stumbling across treasure chests as he easily finds his way to the next level, and at last, he finds the 50th level boss. At the Adventurers Guild in Shirul, they are bothered that no one has seen Luciel for a long period of 6 months, and even the master hasn't heard a peep from him either. The last time he was ever spotted was when he had stopped by to get food and substance X. They wonder if he had gone on an expedition, as some of them mention that the clinic's prices have been inflated ever since his departure. Then suddenly, the thought of him being locked up by the church scares them to death. Meanwhile, he is on the 15th floor munching his last food at the gate of death. And if the 50th door isn't the last, he is sure to die of hunger, and after his death, with tears welling up in his little eyes, he wonders if he will become undead too, like some of the monsters he had exorcised. He tries to check for possible information from the spell tome that the Pope had gifted him by defeating the floor 40 boss. He finds out about a new spell called Sanctuary Circle, as it purges magic of the dark affinity and burns all ghosts and demons within the circle. It is also a spell of hope which protects all that is holy, and this seems so cool to Luciel, who opens up the dangerous door at once and on opening it. He walks into the very dark space hearing only his own footsteps, but does not in any way look intimidated. He takes a closer look at the strange giant object forming before him, and it looks like it is the final boss. He is very big and possesses a very scary green face. However, instead of foolish Luciel to think of a safety plan, he thinks of giving the monster a name and calls him King White, because he is bigger than all the whites he had ever eliminated. He tries to cast the spell of a tight area on the big evil monster, but he fails on the first attempt, as the monster hits its gigantic leg right in front of Luciel, breaking through the ground and preventing him from saying a word further, as he sheds, tightening out different spirits from its body to attack Luciel, who in turn uses the purification method to eliminate them at once. He noticed that the monsters seemed to be holding on to the black arts, which is also a dark affinity of magic, as he ran, running the Sanctuary Circle, the spell he had read from the spell tome, right before opening the door to the 50th boss. It successfully creates a barrier wielding off the top-tier boss for a while, only for Luciel to run out of magic as he searches for his magic portion immediately, and on drinking it, he regains the right energy, But if that keeps happening, and he runs out of portion, it is very possible for death to be his portion. He tries to finish off the dreadful monster as fast as he can using another method called the Holy Touch of Healing from the Sanctuary Circle spell. The spell seems to be effective. However, the confusing part is that, despite being tortured by the Sanctuary Circle, the monster still moves towards Luciel forcefully. Luciel is able to catch a glimpse of his real face as he disappears into the thin air. He could not but wonder if all the monsters and bosses he had beaten so far were once people like him. He deduces that the monster was trying to say something before his defeat, but it was unclear. However, Luciel notices a book that must have been dropped during the confrontation. He finds it to be forbidden holy magic, as he must report to the Pope at once. He teleports all the items he had retrieved into the magic sack, and just as he was about to head back to the headquarters, a magic door opens in his opposite direction, drawing his attention as he moves rather closer to it, because of a nice smell that was coming from the door. He goes into the chamber despite the fact that he feels like his magic is being drained as he walks along a staircase to another level. He sees a huge dragon that seems caged in fear, grips his balls immediately, knowing that he could not easily defeat something as huge and scary as that. However, he moves closer to observe if it was an undead spirit, as it did not seem to make any move and was just lying on the floor tiredly. He had always heard of the saying that dragons were intelligent, as he wondered if the dragon could speak, and if it appeared that it was undead, he thought not to hesitate to use the Sanctuary Circle to turn it back, as he did not have any choice other than survival. He tries to make his thoughts happen, but ends up waking the dragon instead, as the dragon makes a painful noise and then falls to the ground after Luciel has the Sanctuary spell on it. He rises to his feet immediately, unsure if he has defeated the dragon or not, and as he walks towards it, he notices that it looks very cool and there is no way he would win a fight against such a creature. Instead of Luciel standing back and observing, he foolishly pats a creature whom he is unsure of its state on its head. Insert people. Observing the dragon gives a sharp cry, frightening him. He then speaks immediately, much to Luciel's surprise and prediction. The dragon commends him for defeating him with one attack, as it remarks that his skills are impressive, which will earn him a reward. It points to a treasure-filled hill with its head and tells Luciel that he can have it all to himself, but Luciel protests, thinking that it is a trap. However, the dragon relaxes his mind by telling him that there are no evil spirits left in the labyrinth, and once he collects the remaining magic stones, the labyrinth is bound to disappear. The dragon is willing to let him choose how to proceed, as it is a special privilege that is designed for just him alone. Luciel then decides to ask him questions on finding out that he is a friendly dragon. He asked about the purpose of the labyrinth, and then the dragon explains that those who are of the dragon race were sealed away where the miasma gathers, and the labyrinth is one of the places. This makes Luciel worried, as he thinks that if they were really trapped, a hero should have rescued them a long time ago. However, no heroes at all appeared, and instead, they have been left to reside in the labyrinth. The dragon, however, expresses his surprise at how Luciel had not clung to the treasure with greed, and then decides to grant him his protection. Luciel introduces himself on request as he inquires to know the details of the protection. The dragon then tells him that he will make him very hard to take out, and advises him to save as many as he can, as monsters will only get powerful with time. And then, after making this statement, he confers his protection and remains upon Luciel, who promises to do his best after becoming empowered by the dragon, whose dry bones are now left to rot, and acquires a new title as the Dragon Slayer, after which he stores up all the items and treasures that have been retrieved. Just as he is about to set out, a necklace and a staff are shown out of the atmosphere and bestowed on him to indicate that he has just released the seal, and that a magic that is unknown to him takes him out of the labyrinth to Catalia's abode. She first throws weapons at him as she is on alert, but stops on finding out that it was Luciel who had returned home alive. This makes her really happy as she gives him a tight hug to return alive. He had been gone for half a year, and she had thought that something bad had happened in the labyrinth, only for him to return safely. She switches immediately and tells him that he has to stop his stupid adventure at once, as he almost drove the two cities crazy in his absence. She takes him out to see a crowd asking the headquarters to release their street weirdo, as she also leads him to see Gulgur, Galba, and Broad, who had traveled from a long distance because they thought he had died. Broad is so happy to see him and almost squeezes out his esophagus while trying to hug him. Luciel is equally happy to see them as he asks them why they had visited the capital. Gulgur remarks that he is very special, and they could not have ignored the news of his disappearance. Brod and Galbar question him about what he has been up to in the past few years, and then, while he tries to say something, he is struck by hunger as his stomach growls. They settle down to eat as Golgar and the guildmaster join hands to make some dishes that in turn make Lucial drool. However, not one of them forgets to make him drink substance X. People who could not afford a clinic heard the rumors of his return and then overwhelmed the guild, making it a free day for him. He then took advantage of his master being around to train with him. Brod tells him to come to him when he is ready, as he still fails to take Brod down after so many years of trying. Brod remarks that he seems to be getting it together, and asks him if he feels like he has gotten stronger, while he resolves to smack out the false confidence in him. Lucial replies with a "yes sir," and keeps getting whooped in the ass until his clothes are tattered, and his t-shirt turns into a crop top alongside his long trousers, becoming a set of tattered shorts. People in the guild watch in awe and admiration at the same time. The story of the whirlwind. Brod happens to have traveled so far that everyone recognizes him immediately, calling him the real thing and still maintaining Lucial's nickname. On the next day, everyone gathers round Lucial recounting how happy they are to note that he survived. Some also remark that he is the only one who can successfully train under Brod's sand. They bid him farewell and ask him to heal them if they ever get hurt again. Brod's voice calling him an idiot apprentice jolts him back to reality. He states that so many people were worried about him, but it is pathetic that he is still so weak, and he needs to be aware and also work on it. Golgar then tells Brod to desist from getting all mean as Lucial might never return to Meritoni just because of that. This immediately puts Brod on his toes, and Lucial, on noticing, promises to never stay away from home, as he is willing to come back as soon as he can. Galbar then promises to also train him when he returns, as he thinks his style of fighting might be more fitting for a coward like Lucial. Brod steps into his face and warns him to not steal his apprentice. Galbar ignores Brod and tilts his head sideways just to tell Lucial to take a girl when he is returning to Meritoni. At the mention of a girl, Lucial remembers that he wants to give a letter to Nanella and Monica. Brod teases him for using him as a message courier, but remarks that they will both be pleased to get a letter from him. They were ready to drop everything they were doing to rush down to Shirul, but Brod had stopped them as he believed that Lucial could not have died. Lucial is moved to tears when he has to bid them farewell from the Shirul capital. He cries uncontrollably and decides to send a report to the Pope the next day. She seems very pleased that he is alive, and that she reveals that she had sent reinforcements in from Lumina and her regiment to watch over him. But they faced some difficulties on the 3rd floor, and so she asked him why he did not return for a long period. And then he explains all that he had encountered inside the labyrinth. She commends him as no one had expected him to take down the boss on the 50th level so fast, and it is even more commendable that he is able to return without complications. However, Lucial tells the Pope and Lumino what had occurred on the 50th floor just after she dismissed the other healers and spoke in detail about the forbidden holy magic tome he had recovered. And he also does not hesitate to tell her about the undead holy dragon that he had found. The Pope then forbids Lumina and her regiment from speaking to anyone about what Lucial had told them. A celebration is held in his honor, and he is promoted to the S rank after he declares a few changes to the price paid for healing, and things begin to get better for both the residents of Shirul and Meritoni. If you have watched this recap till now, type "This blew my mind" in the comments. Subscribe and check out other videos. You'll definitely enjoy the story of Sadichi, a fat and ugly loser who gets bullied in school a lot. This comes to an end when his entire school is transported to a new game world. Here he gets a cheat skill to get overpowered. Check out our last recap and find out. Love, like and subscribe so we can keep bringing you entertaining recaps.